So, boundaries are so interesting when you never used to have them and then you start implementing them, and then the people that have been in your life that don't implement them, you try to implement them with them, and things just like fall apart, or they don't, because those people are potentially interested in having boundaries, but they don't always, it doesn't always work that way. Boundaries are a very interesting thing. Not only boundaries, I mean, this all goes hand in hand with what I've been talking about recently: communication. When you approach somebody, right, and you're like, I want to have better communication, and then it just doesn't work out. It's so interesting, like when you watch just kind of like the unfolding of it not working out and how that unfolds and why that unfolds and everything. It's so interesting. Healing is such an interesting journey, and it's really cool to be here. It's really interesting to watch how everything unfolds. Um, More recently, what I've been looking at is communication, as I have made a video on that, right? And communication specifically in the sense of like, all right, I want to get better at communication. That means active listening. That means consistent and clear and direct communication, the way that you speak to somebody. Just my drive to get better at that is all for my healing, right? And also just like to have better relationships with people. But it's just so interesting that because of the way that I wouldn't say that because of the way that boundaries work. I wouldn't say that that's the reality of what's going on here, but because of the way that people feel about things, right? People's feelings are very interesting. And a lot of people feel that boundaries are a personal attack. It's very interesting, right? As I have been setting boundaries in my life with the people closest to me, I have noticed that they get very defensive. And they get defensive because they feel like they're losing something, or they feel like they're losing control, maybe, over something that they never actually really had control over. It was just an illusion of a space that they had in my life or somebody's life. It's just so interesting to watch it unfold. This process of setting boundaries and watching who does what, right? And it's like, depending on how people react or respond to boundaries, says everything that you need to know about them. It's just the way that it is. And I think that that's fascinating. Boundaries, setting boundaries, is a great assertion at getting to really know people. Because if you really want to know who somebody is or how they feel, just up your standards in life. Imagine, for instance, imagine you go to somebody, right? And this, the person that you go to, they're not the best with communication, right? They have a tendency to talk over you, talk over other people and everything. And you go to them, and you're like, all right, I'm going to up my standards, and then you communicate to them what it is that you're trying to improve in terms of communication, right? They don't get with it, right? And when I look at that kind of stuff, it's like, strange. This is so strange. Like, it's interesting that, one, a person can be raised in an environment of chaos. Very interesting. I mean, of course, that's a result of trauma. It's a result of dysfunctionality in family systems. But it's even more so interesting that as a result of being raised in chaos, if you are unaware of it, if you're, if you don't have the intention of trying to do better for yourself, you're going to continue to seek that out. And I just think that that's totally fascinating. Um, but yeah, one of the most interesting things that I've learned in terms of boundaries is that a majority of people do not have them. And I'm also not like expert at them either. Like there are times that it's like, oh wait a second, that's not my place. Or it's like, oh wait a second, I need to catch this person and let them know that that's not their place. But the things that like, you know, unsolicited advice. The amount of times that I've given unsolicited advice in my life, like looking back now. I mean, this is also because I've experienced in being conditioned into the rescuer. So like, the rescuer is always going to be there to try to put out the fire. Whatever the rescuer feels is necessary, it's going to do, right? it's going to pursue. Um, but boundaries are so interesting. And, like when I first started learning about boundaries, I kind of had my own ideas about them, right? I kind of had my own thoughts and feelings. Like, I don't know about these things, right? But then, like, when you think about it, it's like, okay, setting a boundary actually looks like I will not talk about my plans for getting married. Um, and you can say that to anybody, right? Traditionally, a lot of parents think that, and depending on where you come from, it's actually normalized that parents not only get to have a say in your marriage, but they also get to pick a fucking partner for you. Like, wow. Um, yeah, no. I don't really care about culture when it comes to boundaries. What I care about is boundaries. I care about the individual. I care about the evolution of the individual, right? Cultural norms many oftentimes void boundaries, right? This whole idea of groupthink. No, don't conform. Please form your own thoughts, your own opinions, your own ideas, your own feelings for your sake, right? Don't just give in to what's easy. Don't give in to like, hey, what do you think? 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 Well, what do you think? Well, what do you think? Well, what? No, that's lame. Um, Form your own shit. And the more that you do that, the more you will be firm in your own sense of self. People that don't have boundaries, I would argue, I'll end it off here. People that don't have boundaries, I would argue, do not have a strong sense of self. And this is usually because they come from a system of enmeshment that does not allow for individuality, individuation, um, an individual sense of self, boundaries in and of themselves. Everyone is involved and invested with everyone's shit, and there are no walls. There are no, hey, I need to learn to be a fucking individual and deal with this shit on my own. I appreciate everyone being here for me, but you guys need to give me some fucking space. Like it's very interesting. Um, Boundaries are real, and if you implement them in your life, if you set them and you maintain them, your life will get better.